Afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I probably know a lot of you, but I'm Loren Jones, the chair of the Northern Nuclear Alliance, so obviously we continue to provide a series of kind of online sessions to try and ensure that we're as informed and as connected as possible. And I think a lot of people are getting used to these type of online events. I've certainly had a number of them, and I think it's actually working out pretty well because you can do a lot more than you would have been able to in the past. So I think this is the fourth or fifth that we've now done as the NNA. So it's great to see that we're adapting and keeping connected with the membership. So just a quick note, we've got a session next week, myself with Monica and James and some of the steering group for the events team to really start thinking about the programme for next year, for the next calendar year. So we've got a number of ideas already, and I think we're looking at something kind of probably third week in January. So we'll come back out with some details as soon as possible on that one. But as always, any input from the membership on the types of topics you would like to see, then by all means, put it in the chat now. We can pick it up, or drop us a note directly. So yeah, we want to make sure we're covering the topics that people want to hear about. So please participate in that. What we have tried to do is, you'll note this is a lot more of a kind of bite-size session. So some of the feedback was, when it's a hard slug, when it's a few hours on the same Zoom session. So we try to make it more bite-size and kind of have one specific topic at a time, really. So so with that, I'll say just a bit of an introduction for Mike Finnerty. So Mike is the Deputy Chief Nuclear Inspector and the Nuclear Reactors Director for the Office of Nuclear Regulation. And Mike is going to come and give an overview of the approach to regulating innovation. In September of 2020, the ONR published a document setting how they want to be open and responsive to facilitating innovation and new solutions into the sector, and really set out kind of four principles: being enabling, accessible, open-minded, and providing stimulating challenge, working collaboratively, being an adaptable and responsive to the environment, and horizon scanning for future demands and new technologies. So I actually picked up the report probably last week and had a read of it. It was really good to actually just draw my eye to it. It's something I hadn't picked up on before. So hopefully this will do the same for a number of people that might have missed it back in September. So we'll make sure the link's put on the chat for people there. But Mike, a big thanks for your support in this, and over to you.
Okay, lovely. Thanks, Loren. I think the video and audio is working okay. You can all hear me?
Loud and clear.
Great. Yeah. Okay, lovely. Thanks. Well, good afternoon, everyone. So as Loren said, I'm Mike Finnerty, Deputy Chief Inspector and Director for the New Reactors Division at ONR. Now, one of the reasons I've been involved in the innovation work that we've been doing is clearly my role as Director for New Reactors Division. We're very much looking at new technologies, small modular reactors, advanced nuclear technologies, etc. So that fits in neatly, I think, with the innovation agenda. But also a few years ago, I was one of the architects for our approach to how we regulated Sellafield, and with it, as part of that approach, we kind of essentially put into play an approach that became our enabling regulation, essentially, and we published a guide on this about 2 years ago. And this really looks at things like being open-minded. It's about identifying common purposes, working with stakeholders, looking at fit-for-purpose solutions. And a lot of that work was about getting the right behaviours across our organisation and across all stakeholders. And this really set the ground rules, we felt, as to how we can essentially approach innovation. And so this document that we have published, and I'll talk a little bit more as we go through the session, really builds on, that enabling regulation guide. So I think, Loren, as you mentioned, you could share the link for the innovation report. I'll get you the link as well if you don't have it.
Just done it there, Mike. So
Perfect.
I'll just put it on the chat.
Great, perfect. And for the enabling regulation approach to enabling regulation as well, because I think these two, they kind of complement each other really, because they do talk about the behaviours that we feel are necessary as part of us as regulators and also the industry. So that was where all this came from, and it culminated essentially in the publication in September, as Loren said. So then really it's what this session today is about, is to publicise the fact that we have published this approach, but also as well to see what are the next steps, because we believe this is really the start of a journey really that we'd like to share with industry, with the supply chain, and with government as well, to really kind of essentially get the best benefits that we can from innovation. So that's the introduction. I'll move on to the next slide, please, Monica. So the first question really is about why innovation, and it almost kind of seems as though innovation has been a bit of a buzzword really in modern society. It's how do we achieve new solutions, do new stuff, etc. And innovation is always the key word in there. It's mentioned a number of times. It's in the government's clean growth strategy, which the government's ambition is to create the best possible environment for the private sector to innovate and invest in low carbon technologies. And it's also specifically talked about within the nuclear sector deal. It talks about long-term vision of innovation growth. It's mentioned particularly for regulators within the grand title of this white paper, regulation for the fourth industrial revolution, which again says that that regulators need to support innovation whilst protecting citizens and the environment. So we can't forget that's our kind of core purpose essentially. But we do need to take this agile approach to regulation. That's set out in the white paper, and it sets down a number of challenges for regulators, which is one of the key hooks, really, I guess, within the report that we produced. Plus, there's lots of other references, from not just from nuclear, but from lots of other sectors, all about why innovation is so important and why we need to grasp this to make improvements right across the sector. So next slide, please, Monica. So in terms of actually innovation in nuclear, so the Nuclear's Innovation Programme, it's invested approximately £180 million has been invested in nuclear innovation from 2016 to 2021. And some of this has actually has been provided to the regulator to essentially to build our capability and for us to look at innovation. In the nuclear sector deal, there are some very kind of challenging but specific targets that are referred to. One is about driving down the cost of new nuclear through innovation. And this is across the sector, particularly new build, 30% cost reduction by 2030, decommissioning cost savings at 20% by 2030. And in order to achieve these are not going to be easy. I think there is a recognition that it's almost a transformational change is required across the sector to be able to meet these targets. And so therefore, I think innovation is really important. And by innovation, we mean not just technical innovations, but actually innovation in terms of how we do things. So this is right across the sector. It's actually new technologies, new ways of actually writing safety cases, new ways of financing deals, etc. I think it covers the whole spectrum of new thinking, really. And I think that's really what's needed to actually, as I said, to meet these targets. And also as well, there was an Arab report to BEIS, which again talked about clean growth through innovation. But it was very clear in this document that, there's a real urgency for this. This is something that, I think, you know, if we're going to meet for example, if we're going to meet the carbon, zero carbon targets in 2050, and nuclear has a role in that, because of the lead time, you know, to actually, you know, design, commission, build new nuclear power stations, we have to act now. And actually the window is quite small, really. So this really kind of clearly states that there is a need for real urgent action. And I think a lot of the working groups associated with the nuclear sector deal also recognise that, you know, this is, we can't kind of sit around and think about this, you know, and prevaricate, etc., etc. I think urgent action is needed quickly. You know, so there's a real driver there for all of us, I think. So, Monica, next slide, please. So there's, I think the first question then is that certainly came to us as a regulator was, you know, what should our role be in innovation? We looked at the white paper that said that regulators, you know, need to be agile, need to take a position here. But it's a fine line, really. There's clearly a role for government and industry to lead on innovation, you know, and particularly in terms of technical innovations, etc. But often the regulator, it can be seen as a barrier to innovation. We as regulators have to remain independent. You know, our prime role is to protect people and society. And so it's, whilst we can be supportive of innovation, you know, ultimately we can't get away from the fact that that is our role. You know, we have to stay independent. We have to protect people and society. And we look at examples such as Boeing, where it can go tragically wrong. You know, if, you know, an innovative kind of approach or an innovative piece of technology, etc., comes into, you know, comes to the market, and it hasn't been, you know, you know, the kind of things that can potentially go wrong haven't really been properly considered. You know, so we do need to make sure that actually our kind of fundamental raison d'etre, if you like, is to protect people and society, and we need to maintain that. However, within the UK, ONR, we operate with a goal-setting approach. It's not unique, but, you know, it is different to a lot of sovereign regulators around the globe. And I think this goal-setting approach really encourages innovation and flexible solutions. As I said earlier, I felt that this approach actually can really build on our enabling approach, and build on this to regulate in a manner that encourages innovation, and it's fully open to new ideas and approaches. As I said, you know, the enabling approach, you know, really kind of crystallized, I think, a few years ago for us when we looked at the, you know, the approach that we took to regulating legacy ponds and silos, in particular at Sellafield, where we worked with a number of stakeholders, and essentially identified a common purpose for all of those stakeholders, identified fit-for-purpose solutions, etc. And this is the same kind of behaviours that we really kind of wanted to capture, to essentially to really kind of, you know, encourage innovation right across the sector. As I've said, our definition of innovation is broad, and it may cover any new initiatives or novel approaches. I think specifically, though, it needs to address for us to be involved. I think we have to be convinced, I guess, that any new approach addresses a specific need, and it does bring benefits to the nuclear sector. So this isn't about innovation just for innovation's sake. This is all about actually identifying new solutions and novel ways of doing things that can actually really address a specific need and bring benefits, particularly new nuclear safety benefits. But sometimes, you know, if there is something that where you know, an activity can be done much cheaper, that in itself can actually have benefits, because it will potentially free up funds for, you know, for further decommissioning, for example. You know, so we do have to be open-minded to think about how we look at innovation techniques and innovation solutions. So next one, please, Monica. So, you know, what was our role in innovation then? So as I said, our kind of thinking really culminated in the publication, which is our ONR's approach to regulating innovation, which was in September 2020. What this did was this really confirms that we are open to innovation. We won't be a barrier to innovation. We will adopt all those right behaviours. We will adopt that enabling approach so that actually we can kind of be open-minded essentially to innovations and to novel solutions. What we've done is we've illustrated our approach through a number of case studies. This is examples of where we believe actually we have been either innovative in the past, or we've actually helped work with stakeholders to bring innovative solutions to fruition. Nevertheless, our feeling was that we can do a lot more. Because there was, going out and speaking to stakeholders, there was a belief that, well, despite us, believing that we're not a barrier to innovation, there was still a belief that sometimes regulators can be that barrier. And also as well, it was people were finding it difficult to say, well, I've got this kind of new idea, but I'm not really sure who in R to speak to. So one of the things that we felt might help is to create an innovation cell. And essentially, this is an idea where we can create a safe space where innovators can come and discuss prospective innovations with us without any prejudice to the regulatory decisions. This is an idea that has been, well, it was kind of mixed really, I guess, with some of my colleagues at ONR when we first talked about this, because this is very much on that kind of dividing line that I talked about earlier. It's right that we absolutely maintain our independence, and we don't want to get drawn into as part of the process or part of the design of a particular innovation. Nevertheless, we believe actually we can do this. We can actually maintain that independence while providing guidance and support and help to prospective innovators. It won't be easy, but I think that this is something that we are aspiring to deliver. But also the other thing as well, that what we wanted to do with this publication was to publicise our approach with industry and the supply chain, particularly starting off with through the Nuclear Sector Deal Innovation Group, but also through forums like this, where we can publicise and say, right, this is where we are. Share our kind of thinking with across industry, and essentially, open the dialogue, because we feel as though there is plenty of room for industry, supply chain, government, and regulators to actually communicate and to discuss kind of innovation much more, share ideas, and really help drive some of this forward. And as I said earlier, it's, I think that one of the reasons why we really wanted to open up this dialogue is because we think there is an urgency, really. If we're going to do things differently as a nuclear sector, we have to start doing things now. So I think there's one more slide, please, Monica. So, we've published our guide. I've talked about our approach. What actually next are we going to do, and how are we going to take this forward? So, as I said, really the key thing that we want to do is actually proactively work with innovators to help overcome barriers to adopting new approaches. I think how we do this is that we need to just open the discussion, to open the dialogue. I think the publication of our approach is really the start of that journey. And I'm looking to, particularly over the next 12 months, it will probably be longer than this, to really kind of engage with as many people as possible so that they can understand what our approach is. And there's almost kind of an open door there really to come and approach the regulator so that we can explain our thinking, and I mean, I think it can't be a free-for-all. I think we need to kind of target which innovations, we would look to take through, this kind of, I'll talk a little bit later, via sandbox approach. this innovation cell. But nevertheless, I think we kind of have to work with industry to be able to identify what really will actually be beneficial of the sector, and how can we take that forward. We'll further enhance our enabling approach. I think, as I said, behaviors, about having the right behaviors. It's about being open-minded. It's about looking for fit-for-purpose solutions. It's about engaging constructively with stakeholders right across the piece, and take a positive enabling approach. The sandbox approach that I talked about, that really is kind of part of that innovation cell. It's where ideas can be progressed in a safe space, so that or without any prejudice to our regulatory decision-making process. And also as well, we want to kind of, engage with authoritative bodies across industry and government, because, as I said, I think this is starting to have the conversation. But I think if we can put in place, a real kind of framework, which we can, this, as I said, this isn't just a free-for-all, but if we can put in place a framework that will really help innovations come to the fore, I think that could be really beneficial. There are, well, I think, there's really good practices around nuclear, but also as well, I think, in some respects, nuclear has been really quite slow to innovate. And so what we're looking to do is actually try to share good practice and foster closer working for us with other regulators, particularly from other sectors, but also, for other sectors and others, see how other industry have approached this. One of the things, for example, is that we're looking to do is that we recognise that the Civil Aviation Authority, the regulator for essentially for the airways, has done something, has created a sandbox for drones. And so we want to actually, engage with them, touch base with them, and see how that worked, so that we can actually, do something similar for nuclear. And similarly as well, this isn't just about within the UK. We believe actually there are lots of ideas and approaches that we can share with international colleagues as well. I went to a conference in Korea last year. It was a World Global Forum, about innovation. And it was remarkable just how many organizations across the globe had similar challenges and similar relationships with the regulator, and they perceived similar barriers as well. So I'm sure there's kind of opportunities there where we can kind of share experiences and share solutions, basically, to see if we can actually, really kind of make some of this happen. So there we go. Well, I've been speaking for about half an hour or so now. So that's the end of my slides. I'm happy to open up the debate, really, take any questions, or really just be open for a discussion from anybody.
Great. Well, thanks for that, Mike. Have I unmuted myself? I seem to have.
Yeah. Yes.
My picture seems to have stalled on my computer. I'm pulling a funny face there. So, Mike, fascinating. Thanks for give us a bit of an overview there in terms of how you guys have clearly got to link in with where the industry's going, but also respecting your primary purpose. I think everyone recognises that is a really fine line to be engaging and collaborative versus, taking that primary purpose forward. Really fantastic to hear. Obviously, collaboration with other regulators. I think certainly you're right. The nuclear sector is quite behind a number of industries in kind of their use of robotics, artificial intelligence, and thing that comes to mind straight away is in the highway side of things. You can just imagine the same regulatory kind of conversations going on about keeping people safe on roads with self-driving cars and so on. So there must be a lot of similar challenges with what some of the new innovations that are coming through in the nuclear sector in terms of use of robots and self-driving robots in many respects for decommissioning activities and so on. Right. So lots of good practice, I'm sure, to learn from that, and a sandbox approach, having a kind of a safe space to put these crazy ideas forward, I suppose. is always beneficial. So we've got a few questions, and we've built in a good amount of time for a really good discussion, because we want to make these two-way conversations as opposed to just presentations. I think that's where the best comes out of it. So starting off then, so I'm just going to go to the chat function. So first one, Phil, there was a great benefit, Phil Wisgar, there was a great benefit in linking the sector deals. Nuclear will not realise the full savings were allowing the construction sector deal by way of example at the same time. Okay, so that's a comment more than the questions. Phil, anything you want to add to that?
Yes, thank you. Great presentation, Mike. We appreciate that. The sector deals that Bayes issued a while ago need some joined up thinking. And certainly in the parallel world, something I do, which Loren and the rest of the team know about, is we have a digital special interest group where we actually look at some of these issues, and that's run between ourselves and the knowledge transfer network actually for nuclear, with Ray Chegwin there, and also the Nuclear Institute. The key issue is we're now aligning the nuclear stuff with the Construction Innovations Hub, which is a big issue at bringing down the cost of construction in general. But there's got to be some way of linking the two with that with nuclear, so that we realise the cost that we can save on new build nuclear schemes, and also in the way that we decommission our schemes as well, because there's a lot of construction work involved in that.
I agree, Phil. I think it's one of the things that we're really keen to do is to look across other sectors. My kind of view is that the nuclear sector deal, when it was launched 2 years ago, or since it was launched 2 years ago, it's had some successes, but in many kind of instances, it's really struggled, I think, to really start to make a difference. I think this has been realised now with the setup of some of the nuclear sector deal working groups, and I think we're going to see an increased kind of drive really to take forward some of these working groups. Certainly the one that I sit on, it's the Innovation Working Group, which is chaired by Fiona Raymond from NNA, and I know that Fiona is really keen to look across the piece really at other sectors and see how people do things, and that's a really good it's a really good kind of example of where I think nuclear can join up with other sectors, but there are many more as well. So it is something I think I'll take back to the group to see how we can actually link up with all of these other groups and really learn from them.
Thank you for that.
Thanks, Phil.
I suppose, again, it's trying to find those types of technologies and areas that are similar in those multi-sectors where regulation might be quite similar. Great. Okay, and my chat bar's just disappeared. Steve Lawler, you've got a long question now. I'm going to let you read that one out yourself. Steve, are you there?
Yeah, thanks. You're so kind. Hi everyone. Thank you. Really good, Mike. Thank you for your presentation. Really interesting. The one question I've got is relevant in my mind at the moment, because there's an event going on at the US NRC this week around advanced manufacturing technologies for nuclear applications. This is something that's been running for a number of years now, and I've been involved in the past. It's a really good way to share innovation, ideas and progress across the supply chain. And although it's a US-led event, there's a lot of UK and other international interest as well. And I suppose one of the questions I had was really, is it something that you would consider doing something similar to support the innovation cells approach?
Yeah, it's a good idea, actually. I mean, we do work with a lot of our international regulatory colleagues, particularly US NRC and also the Canadian regulator. And often it's the OECD, NEA that is a good forum for bringing together, the discussions amongst different regulators. So we do share information. But actually, hosting something, I think this is myself and Mark Foy have talked about this, about whether we can actually, host some kind of event that really will almost kind of showcase, what's happening across the industry. We'll need to look at how that could potentially be funded, but certainly it's something that myself and Mark Foy have thought that there might be space to do this. And this is why I think it's important to kind of open the discussions, open the dialogue, and if across industry and supply chain, there's almost kind of a desire from industry to, or industry say that actually this could be a really good idea and it could be really beneficial, get a bit of groundswell going, then, we can make it happen. So it's a really good suggestion, Steve. We'll keep a close watch on that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Loren, it's James. Just in response to that, Mike, it's more of a comment than a question. But there are a number of, you mentioned funding, really. There's a number of events that go on remotely, really. You could probably piggyback upon, really.
Yeah.
Maybe we could share with yourself that Loren gets involved, I get in yourself, that you could become part of the agenda because it actually aligns quite neatly with what people are looking to achieve.
Yeah.
So there's probably an opportunity from ourselves to really engage with you.
Yeah, well, great. Yeah.
More of a comment than a question, that, of course.
Okay.
But, it's good that you're reaching out, and then we'll reach back.
It's amazing as well, and we certainly, when we network with and have joint events with other clusters such as Beck BC and Wales Nuclear Forum, the number of people that we can get along to these events, and I think it's relatively cost effective. It doesn't cost much to run these kind of things, so that might be a forum for it.
Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah, good.
Okay, great. As I've just put in notes, this uses time. It's a great opportunity to engage those who aren't getting out much at the moment. Use the opportunity while Mike's here and his knowledge, and to share thoughts and have some discussions. So, let's not be shy. Let's put forward our thoughts and get a bit of discussion going here. So, Ray, you've just noted there. Ray, good to have your thoughts on this, because clearly this is bang in the middle of your sweet spot.
Exactly. Thanks, Loren. Thanks for the presentation, Mike. That's great. KTN, we're funded from BASE via Innovate UK to be the, if you like, innovation network connecting for positive change. So we run a number of programs. One of those is called Innovation Exchange, and this is where we work with companies, large companies across the sector, across the energy sectors, against specific challenges. So it was really just a comment there that, I think you mentioned if you could identify what technologies, what are the key areas. Well, once those are identified, and then we can certainly play a part in sort of reaching out to other sectors.
Okay. Yeah.
Finding out what's going out in other sectors and inviting innovators to come and join the discussions.
Yeah, excellent. That'd be really good. I mean, as I said, I think the this idea, we're just exploring really the idea of having having a sandbox, having an innovation cell. We recognise there are risks to that, because as I said, there could be potentially, get to a situation where we have, innovators all over the place, coming knocking at our door, and we'd be swamped. So I think it's I think we'll need to kind of tread a little bit carefully, but really go out and ask the industry and ask the supply chain what will be beneficial. And already some of the feedback that's come back, certainly robotics keeps coming up, but also things like the artificial intelligence, the digital twins, things like this. We do hear this a lot. So again, I think it almost might be the case where we kind of have a small group together that looks at potential things that we can look at as part of a sandbox or an innovation cell, and then maybe choose to start off with 2 or 3 of those, and then so we kind of triage them almost in the first instance, and then kind of say, right, actually these 2 or 3 innovations we believe will really benefit the industry. There's a lot of kind of call for those, and we can look at those and work with potential innovators to take them forward. So there might be ideas like that we can consider.
I suppose, Mike, is there a way of I'm just trying to think practically, because your remit and funding is clearly primarily on regulation, and as you said, keeping people safe. So if you get every man and his dog coming forward with all different wacky ideas, it could be seen as a risk, and not effective for what the ONR's time and focus should be on. Is there a way industries, and I'm thinking through the likes of KTM, but also we've got specific catalysts set up for advanced at the ANRC at Strathclyde, the NAMRC at Sheffield, and I'm sure there's others are probably offended by not saying, but but those types of catalysts that are specifically focused on the nuclear industry, could they almost be the funnel to I'm not saying kind of sieve out what should be coming forward, but talk as a collective for industry on innovation and put forward those ideas to the sandbox rather than everyone coming chasing at your door?
Yeah, I think there is. I think there is, Loren. Yeah, it's I mean, already we are, we're speaking to organizations like NNA, like NAMRC, we have strong links with them anyway. But I think, as I said, what I think might be helpful is if there is a clear kind of framework that can be put in place, with funding as well. Now, again, speaking to, BEIS have supported us in terms of, the work we've done on SMRs and AMRs in terms of getting ourselves ready to regulate this technology if and when, we're asked to do so. But also as well, just as part of that innovation funding, BEIS recognizes that actually if there is if there's this kind of drive to build the UK supply chain, for example, and we can use these organizations and have a benefit for the whole of UK PLC, then there's clearly kind of ways in which all of that model can be, and our framework can be put together that does there is funding available, including funding for regulators. And as I said, within the government's 10-point plan, there is funding available that has been made available for new nuclear. Some of that has been directed towards us as regulators as well. Anyway, so I think there is already, we are starting to see, those things being taken forward. I just think that it's and again, it's one of the reasons why I'm doing this, and kind of one of the reasons why we published our documents is that if we can all work together and try and get a bit more momentum, really.
Great. No, Mike, thanks for that. Really simple one from Steve here saying, how can we get involved in this, Mike?
Yeah, well, so so where we are now, the plan of work that we had we put in place was, first off, we would publish our document, which we've done. Then what we do is we'd essentially said that, right, then we'll kind of just spend and work via the Nuclear Sector Deal Innovation Group to essentially publish or publicize that document. Because one of my fears was that we'd kind of publish this, put it out there, and then everyone would kind of say, oh, well, that's great, yeah, very good, and kind of just not do anything with it, there'd be no kind of interest, really, to be honest. So that was the first thing we wanted to do. We wanted to see how much appetite is there, amongst the sector, about it, within industry, within the supply chain, etc. And the feedback that I'm starting to get is that actually there is quite a lot of appetite out there. So the next phase now is we're going to put together some specific packages of work that will really to see how we can get some traction. The first one and I was actually just looking at the project initiation document this morning, was for the innovation cell, that we can control internally. But even within that innovation cell, I think we do need some support from industry as to how that might be done. So it's very early days at the moment. You know, we're starting to put together the packages to see, okay, how can we actually, you know, kind of make some of these things happen. But you know, we're open for ideas, really, to be honest. You know, so it's and I think it was Steve who answered the question. I think, Steve, you're speaking to Steve Frost, who works for, or you have met Steve. Steve Frost is one of the guys who works for me, who will be, you know, really taking forward some of this work. And I know he's kind of worked with maybe others on the call as well in terms of what you've done with robotics and other I&C, you know, developments. So there's kind of lots of sorts of ad hoc things ongoing. I think the trick now is actually to bring it all together and put some specific packages of work together to see how we can drive all of this forward.
Great. Okay.
Sorry, it's Bernard Cunningham here. I think particularly at the moment, we're seeing a tremendous legacy of science, which is combating the COVID-19 pandemic, and it's probably been the most impressive innovation program since the early days of the nuclear industry and the space industry. Unfortunately, I think, well, not unfortunately, but inevitably, the issues of COVID and maybe Brexit have pushed the climate emergency into the background somewhat on the news. But we're going to get through the COVID emergency, and we're clearly, in the next short time, we're going to be through Brexit. And something Loren raised yesterday in another meeting was the increasing relationship between the hydrogen economy and the nuclear industry. And that's going to require tremendous innovation to bring an affordable and a reliable energy source to the public and to industry. I don't really have a question, Mike, but it just seems, I do think and I hope that once we're through our current concerns, we will see a rapid return of the climate emergency and the innovation needed to bring about a solution. So I don't have a question, but it's really just a thought about the future.
Yeah, Bernard, I think you're absolutely right. I was recently speaking to Stephen Speed, who's one of the directors on the nuclear side at BEIS, and he said exactly that same thing. He said this, you know, senior officials really are the kind of getting their heads together now between, you know, looking at, well, okay, actually COVID is, you know, it's not over yet, but we will get through this and there is kind of an end in sight. Similarly with Brexit, and they're really now kind of getting their heads together to say, so what will be the big challenge, you know, once we've actually got through those things? And without question, climate change will just come massively looming, you know, there, and there will be something that we need to address. And as I said earlier, I think, you know, there'll be an increased urgency, I think. So you're absolutely right, Bernard. The other interesting thing as well, that, you know, that with COVID, and as you said, you know, all the science that's gone around that to bring a vaccine, brilliant. But also actually from a regulatory point of view as well, you know, the UK regulators have been able to work in a different way, in an innovative way, to actually ensure that, you know, the UK is first for mass testing. And they actually changed the way they, you know, they actually regulated that, you know, the vaccine. So there's kind of loads of lessons within there to learn, really, and it just brings home to you that, yeah, absolutely, you know, if we do kind of you know, approach these difficult problems, but with, you know, with open-minded user science, you know, really try to be kind of look at things differently, you know, we can get some great outcomes, basically.
Thank you.
It's amazing, Bernard. Only when you really said that, it kind of the synergies between kind of the space race and the arms race and so on. You know, it's amazing when there's a driver to need how quickly things get done. And clearly there was, some negatives clearly to the downside of that in terms of what we're cleaning up now in terms of legacy waste. But it's amazing what can be achieved and ways delivered, when there's a burning platform, if you want to put it that way. Great. And also another good point about the hydrogen link, and we're trying to certainly do some work in the NNA with the Northwest Nuclear Arc as well on looking at how we can bring those two industries together closer, because one can't do it without the other. But that in itself brings some very challenging regulations in terms of bringing hydrogen next to a nuclear facility. It's it's got a lot of challenges there that the Japanese clearly had to overcome and on their program and so on. So I think there's some learning on that certainly. Okay, I'm just conscious of the time, so my chat box has disappeared again. Is there any other questions from anyone since we've had that discussion there? No.
I've got a question.
Great.
Loren.
Go on then, Monica. I was just about to start calling out people.
I obviously read your mind. Mike, you touched a little bit on sort of the behaviours that you think, or on behaviours and what might be needed or to start to really get this innovative mindset and start to drive some progress in the sector. And I just wanted to know if you could expand a little bit further on what you might think those behaviours might look like, or if there's anything from the previous studies that you want to see carried forward, or maybe see from the supply chain.
So I kind of, one of the things that the way I capture this is that I've heard many times over my career, not just within ONR working as a regulator, but when I was out in industry as well, is this kind of view that regulator will never let you get away with that. And which is just, and that's just that presumption, really, to be honest, you don't go speak to the regulators and, because they will stonewall you, they will, whatever, there will always be a resistance. That is, if there is one thing to kind of take away from any of this, it's that, and to kind of the thing that goes hand in hand with that is early engagement. It's really having really proper, open, transparent early engagement, because often, the reason why those things happen, why we do get this situation where, people say, "Oh, regulator will never let you get away with that." It's because either a licensee or whatever haven't explained themselves, explained, the justification for an approach appropriately enough, or the regulator themselves actually haven't explained actually why this isn't good enough. So it's not having that proper dialogue. And if we can have that proper dialogue early enough and be kind of adult enough that we can have that dialogue and be really clear about what we mean, then that can just bring so many benefits. So that's one of the main things, I think, Monica. And then it's a case of, things like, I've mentioned it a few times today, it's things like identifying fit for purpose solutions. This again, there's something in the language about fit for purpose. People seem to think that, fit for purpose is it's some kind of, you're accepting some kind of lower standard, really. That's not the case. It's about actually accepting, the appropriate standards for the appropriate application. So some things, you absolutely need gold standards. If you're looking at really nuclear safety critical components inside a pressure vessel, for example. But in other aspects, if you're going to, just get a load of kind of, spent fuel out of a pond, it might be completely different, different standards, or, depending on what the activity is. So there's there's an awful lot in the language, really, and it's about having that mature kind of open dialogue between industry and regulators is the really, really key important thing.
Right,
really interesting, Mike. We ran a challenge on using artificial intelligence to review nuclear safety cases, and I was speaking with one of the people there who said, "Oh no, the regulator would never go for that." And I actually quoted you, though, because I think it was SciTech 2019, I forget now,
right,
when you said, "I don't want to hear that phrase anymore." So that's good to know.
Excellent. Good. Yeah.
Great. Okay, well, some really good conversation there. I'm seeing a few people having to pop off now and who are not far off the mark there. So, Mike, once again, thank you very much for your time. Really interesting presentation and some good conversation. Really, industry welcomes this level of engagement, and it's great. Thanks for that. Quick thank you to Monica for hosting as usual, and to James for doing a sterling job at coming up with the program events for the NNA. At this point, I think it's most people will be finishing up probably back end of next week, the week after. Have a wonderful break. Merry Christmas to you all, and thanks once again to everyone. Cheers.